The House That Watches. The village of Carglin lay buried deep in the folds of a forgotten valley, surrounded by thick pine woods and mountains that seemed to lean over it like watchful giants. The place was old, older than memory, and the people who lived there were quiet folk who did not often speak of their past. At the very edge of Carglin, where the last crooked lane dissolved into the forest, there stood a house. It was not simply abandoned, it was rejected, feared, and avoided. The villagers called it the House That Watches. Its windows were like eyes, wide and staring, set deep in the face of the rotting wood. Even in daylight, no one dared to go near. The shutters, though broken, never moved with the wind. The weeds around its foundation grew in unnatural patterns, twisting like skeletal fingers. People whispered that at night, a faint glow pulsed behind the upper windows, as if something inside drew breath. The outsider. When Aaron Grieves arrived in Carglin, the villagers stared. He was an outsider, a young historian with a keen interest in folklore. His latest project was to record stories of haunted places across rural Europe. Carglin's reputation had reached him through an obscure journal. A single line: "No tale chills the bones like that of the watching house of Carglin." The very words thrilled him. Aaron was 30, ambitious, and often reckless. He arrived with nothing but a worn leather satchel, a camera, a notebook, and his restless curiosity. The innkeeper, an old woman named Marta, offered him a room with a reluctant sigh. She warned him, as all villagers did, "You must not go near that house, sir. The land is cursed. It feeds on the curious." Aaron only smiled. "That makes it perfect for my work." That night, he listened to the village whispers. Men at the inn drank their ale in silence, but when the name of the house slipped out, their voices dropped to a murmur. He caught fragments: child vanished, eyes at the window, screams, but no one inside. Aaron wrote everything in his notebook, his excitement mounting. The first glimpse. The next morning, Aaron set out with his camera. The path toward the edge of the village narrowed until it became a strip of cracked stone swallowed by moss. Forest loomed ahead, black pines pressing close. And there, standing like a sentinel at the forest's edge, was the house. It looked worse than he expected. The roof sagged, the timbers leaned, yet somehow it remained whole, as though the rot itself dared not consume it. The windows glared at him, two up top, two below, unblinking, watchful. Aaron raised his camera and snapped a photograph. The click echoed unnaturally loud. He felt a prickle down his neck. For a moment, he swore the glass panes shivered, as if something behind them shifted. He told himself it was only his nerves. Still, he could not shake the sensation that the house was aware of him. Chapter 3. The Story of Elise. That evening, he pressed Marta for details. She resisted at first, wringing her hands in her apron, but finally she relented. "Many years ago," she whispered, "a family lived there. The Rokes, a husband, wife, and their daughter, Elise. She was just 12 when it began. She claimed the house whispered to her. At first, no one believed. Children make stories, yes, but soon her parents changed too. They grew hollow-eyed, pale, as if something drained them." Marta leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Then one winter's night, screams woke the village. When men came, the doors were locked. By dawn, silence. They broke inside. The husband and wife were dead, skin white as chalk, mouths open in terror. And the girl, Elise, she was gone." Aaron scribbled furiously in his notebook. "They searched for her everywhere. The forest, the hills, the cellar. But Elise was never found. Only her doll remained, sitting at the top window, staring down." Marta's voice cracked. "Some say Elise is still there behind the glass, watching." Aaron felt a chill crawl his spine. Still, he smiled. A perfect story. The door opened. On the third day, Aaron approached the house again. He circled it, taking notes. The air grew colder near the foundation. The weeds looked brittle, almost burnt. He found the door warped, but not locked. The villagers had warned him never to enter, but curiosity gnawed at him, groaned open. Inside, dust choked the air. The wooden floor groaned under his boots. The walls were stained, peeling. Cobwebs draped the corners like funeral veils. But worst of all was the silence. With a deep breath, he pushed. The door groaned open. Inside, dust choked the air. The wooden floor groaned under his boots. The walls were stained, peeling. Cobwebs draped the corners like funeral veils. But worst of all was the silence. It was not the silence of emptiness. It was thick, expectant, like the pause before a voice answers. Aaron set his camera on the mantel and clicked the shutter. The flash burst. When the light faded, he thought, just for a second, that something moved in the stairwell. A small shadow. A child's son. The doll. On the second floor, the air grew colder still. His breath misted in the gloom. At the end of the hallway stood a door. It was painted with faint flowers, long faded. A child's room. Inside, the wallpaper peeled in strips. A small bed sagged in the corner. And on the sill sat a porcelain doll, its glass eyes fixed on him. Aaron's pulse quickened. He raised his camera. The doll smiled. It was a tiny curl of porcelain lips, but it hadn't been there before. He stumbled back, heart hammering. The room seemed to sway around him. He snapped another picture. The flash blinded him for an instant. When his vision cleared, the doll was no longer on the sill. It was sitting on the bed. Closer, waiting, groaned open. Inside, dust choked the air. The wooden floor groaned under his boots. The walls were stained, peeling. Cobwebs draped the corners like funeral veil. But worst of all was the silence. It was not the silence of emptiness. It was thick, expectant, like the pause before a voice answers. Aaron set his camera on the mantel and clicked the shutter. The flash burst. When the light faded, he thought, just for a second, that something moved in the stairwell. A small shadow. A child's sigh groaned open. Inside, dust choked the air. The wooden floor groaned under his boots. The walls were stained, peeling. Cobwebs draped the corners like funeral veils. But worst of all was the silence. It was not the silence of emptiness. It was thick, expectant, like the pause before a voice answers. Aaron set his camera on the mantel and clicked the shutter. The flash burst. When the light faded, he thought, just for a second, that something moved in the stairwell. A small shadow. A child's sigh. The doll. On the second floor, the air grew colder still. His breath misted in the gloom. At the end of the hallway stood a door. It was painted with faint flowers, long faded. A child's room. Inside, the wallpaper peeled in strips. A small bed sagged in the corner. And on the sill sat a porcelain doll, its glass eyes fixed on him. Aaron's pulse quickened. He raised his camera. The doll smiled. It was a tiny curl of porcelain lips, but it hadn't been there before. He stumbled back, heart hammering. The room seemed to sway around him. He snapped another picture. The flash blinded him for an instant. When his vision cleared, the doll was no longer on the sill. It was sitting on the bed. Closer, waiting. Aaron fled the house, his breath tearing in his throat. The photographs. That night at the inn, he developed the photographs with shaking hands. The first few were normal. The house from outside, the broken stairwell, the hall. But then he reached the picture of the doll. In the photo, the doll sat on the sill exactly as he'd seen. But behind it, reflected in the glass of the window, was a pale face, a girl's face, hollow eyes, lips pressed against the glass from the inside. Aaron stared at the image until nausea twisted his gut. Marta knocked on his door just then, bringing food. She saw the photograph and went pale. "You must leave, Mr. Grieves," she begged. "The house does not like you. It watches, and it keeps what it watches." But Aaron only shook his head. His fear was real, but so was his hunger for truth. The whispering. He returned to the house the next evening, drawn by something he could not resist. As the sun sank, the shadows inside lengthened. He sat in the child's room, notebook in hand, waiting. At first, only silence. Then faintly, a whisper. "Aaron." His blood froze. The voice was small, girlish, drifting from the darkened corner. "Help me." He spun. The corner was empty. "Who are you?" he stammered. "Elise." The whisper sighed. He gripped his pen so tightly it snapped. His rational mind screamed illusion, hysteria, draft of wind, but his bones knew better. Something was in the room with him. The doll on the bed tilted its head. The descent. Aaron's obsession deepened. For 3 nights he returned, each time hearing more whispers. They begged, they wept, sometimes they laughed in a high, broken tone. One night the whisper said, "Come below, set me free." He found a door at the back of the kitchen, half rotted and nailed shut. He tore the nails loose with trembling hands. Behind it yawned a stairwell into the cellar. The smell hit him first, damp, rot, and something metallic like rust or blood. His lantern flickered as he descended. The cellar walls were carved stone, wet with mildew. Strange symbols scratched the surface, spirals, eyes, hands. In the center stood a small wooden chair. On it lay the doll. Its head was turned toward him, and behind it, chained to the wall, was a small skeleton, no taller than a child. Aaron staggered back, bile rising, but the doll's glass eyes gleamed, alive with malice. Then, in a voice not his own, the whisper hissed from the darkness. "You found me." The Watcher. The lantern went out. In the pitch dark, Aaron heard footsteps, light, bare feet padding across stone. He felt small hands brush his arm. He screamed, fumbling for the stairs, but the way behind him seemed to stretch, the walls closing. Something cold clutched his wrist. A girl's voice breathed in his ear. "Stay with me. Forever." He tore free, crashing up the stairs into the night. He did not remember how he reached the inn, only that he collapsed on the floor, trembling and drenched in sweat. The last entry. Aaron's journal ends abruptly. His last entry reads, "The house is alive. Elise is not gone. She is part of it, bound, watching. The doll is her vessel. She wants me. I feel her eyes even now. The villagers were right. Once you see her, she never lets you go." That was the final page. Weeks later, Marta told the story to another traveler. Aaron had vanished. His room at the inn was empty, save for his notebook and photographs. The only clue was a final picture inside his camera, one no one claimed to have taken. It showed the upstairs window of the house. Behind the glass, 2 figures stared out, a porcelain doll, and beside it, Aaron's pale face, both smiling.